Good morning, everybody. Welcome. By the way, how many of you are returning to Tahoe in the summit? Yeah, well, that's what we like to see in our summits. We cultivate a community over time, and we've been doing these summits for, as John said, for 4 or 5 years under this name, but we started covering programmatic as the OMA RTB event back in 2008. We started covering it, and just remember some of the things we used to talk about back then, and we have talked about over the years again and again and again. Remember when we used to talk about inventory quality? When were we going to unlock all that premium inventory? We were waiting for years and talking about it. I don't know how many panels I programmed on that and asking the question, what is premium? When will the big brand dollars get here? And then, of course, we spent years with panels talking about ad fraud, about transparency, about privacy. And, of course, that perennial question we still ask, when will creative finally catch up to the data and the targeting? This time, however, I really wanted to focus in this annual Tahoe show on execution, on what people are actually doing on the ground, what they're learning from the everyday process of media buying and planning through these channels, and the ways in which they're building their stacks. So one of my mandates for this event is asking all of our speakers to focus on those, get us into the weeds, talk about the ways in which they're doing this, and what they're learning from the actual process of media buying and planning. So for instance, we're going to have over the next few days a lot of examples of this. We're going to start today with T-Mobile. They'll be talking about how they're building their new tech. They're building a tech stack focused on the idea of optimizing customer experience and what that means. We're going to hear today from 3 Day Blinds, just talking about how to clean all that damn data. We're going to hear from both Textile and Essence and the Essence Agency, just talking about, and this is something that actually came out of our last event, just talking about how different companies go about doing media buying and what they can learn from each other about simply that basic process. We're going to have ASICS here talking on Saturday morning, talking about getting beyond this notion, this broad category of viewability, that metric of viewability, and really aiming towards the goal, which is attention. And we'll have cases, loads of cases. We're going to have Norton and LifeLock talking about the lessons that were learned from a new product launch. We're going to have Haven Life, who's going to talk about the ways in which they're using decades of legacy insurance data and combining it with online and digital data and D2C brand building. And of course, we'll also be talking about how media buyers are using this new influx of retail inventory of marketplaces from places like Amazon and others. We're going to be talking about the ways in which video fragmentation is being planned against, and of course, how people are building their first-party data chests. And as I say relentlessly, our events are structured around peer-to-peer sharing. The whole idea, the whole structure of this is people sharing their best practices. And that's what this is about. And that's why I always like to start with a survey. And as many of you, especially those of you among our VIPs know, I sent a survey out several days ago to try to start with your voices, to talk about what you guys are thinking, how you're responding to some key questions in the industry, to seed these conversations. And I'm sure that the roundtables are going to be pretty lively. I got a torrent of responses. I opened up the floodgates. I have literally 21 slides. Don't get scared. I'm not going to walk through all of them for you. We're going to put them online. But I quoted a lot of these. I've underscored some of the things that really popped for me. But for instance, one of my key questions is, where have you seen the most dramatic shifts in media allocation in the last year? And of course, a lot of opinions about moving to OTT and moving into video. I was especially struck by this one respondent who said we've moved the majority of our linear TV budget over to Amazon OTT over the past year. That's amazing. We're going to be talking about this, by the way, on Saturday. We're going to have a panel focused especially on video fragmentation. And of course, CTV and linear. An interesting insight that I pulled out of this is the ways in which the upfront was very tight and very costly and very difficult this year, and opens up the question of whether we're going to see more dollars moving into programmatic and OTT as a result. I'm sorry, I'm moving through this quickly. I wanted to highlight some of the ideas and the concepts and just your voices and get that out there at the beginning, because that's what this event really is about. We'll be posting this deck online so you can go back and download it later. We continue to allocate more and more funds to programmatic and social. It's interesting that the divide here, programmatic drives efficient targeted reach, and social has driven strong conversion rates. I've seen a range of opinions about social and its ability to convert, so it's interesting to hear somewhat different approaches and ideas about social. Here in particular, for instance, Facebook has created this mysterious game that everyone thinks they can win if they just try hard enough. As sort of repeated failures on Facebook, and a lot of people complaining about the conversion rates on Facebook, in addition to the increasing costs and having to deal with that inventory. I hope that will come up a lot over the next few days. I'm curious about podcasts. How many of you are advertising in podcasts already? How many of you are using dynamic insertion and using programmatic driving it? Interesting. I'd love to hear, I personally would love to hear more about how that's worked. I've always wanted to program more around that here. It's been hard to get people to talk about their experiences since it's so early in the game. I also asked, what's been the most successful channel or source for building your trove of first-party data? We're going to be talking about that today, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it throughout the next few days. But it's interesting. There are a lot of traditional channels here that we've seen. You know, sites, lookalike modeling, search driving a lot of this, web and app experiences. Lead gen, using Google Analytics to track people and retarget. And then I asked, what's been the biggest challenge in gathering reliable data from partners and third-party providers? And this is all over the map, but there are some very key themes that emerge here. In addition to transparency, what's reliable and verifiable? Keeping track of the fees, again, transparency. But the biggest theme, I think, of course, is the multiple sources that are necessary. Where am I here? Oops. Multiple sources of data, and this point I think was especially interesting. No one source is outperforming the others, but it's a combination of modeling that works. In other words, the data field is going to be at least as complicated as the programmatic field has been in piecing these things together. Another point that I really that popped for me, because I've been hearing this from a number of marketers and media buyers recently, is the problem of recency. Actually, Beeswax raised that a little bit in their presentation. The importance of recency, and that's one of the things that's harder to track among data providers. This is actually one of my favorites. Accuracy, confirming the data is true. Timeliness, confirming the data is fresh. And nulls, confirming the data exists at scale where you can do our modeling, which I think means that everything about data is challenging. Different partners not playing well together. Probably compatibility is one of the things that popped among all of the answers, that that's the most common problem. Notice about reach reports, different partners not playing well together. Especially Facebook is called out increasingly as one of the real sources of that incompatibility. What's been the biggest challenge to investing in advanced TV, OTT, connected TV, addressable? Across the board, measurability, being able to scale and plan this accurately is really the biggest problem here. And of course, the incompatibility across the screens. We'll be talking about that Saturday. But it's interesting, I think a couple of comments here that really pop for me is the ways in which clients are responding to this environment, that they're still not identifying it as a true programmatic environment in the sense that you're buying audiences instead of shows, but that you're still talking to clients in sort of that older school of needing to them wanting to know what shows they're up against and having the measurement tools to actually show them, and that's not available in this environment yet. Okay. And again, convincing clients that the investment is worth it and the premium CPMs and what you're getting in return, and especially having the metrics and the proof. And again, more of the same, measuring impact. And then I opened up Pandora's box. I asked the question, what's the one thing you would like all ad tech, MarTech vendors to know before they meet with you? And I just got reams of responses to this. But here are some really interesting things that come up. There's especially the emphasis on testing. The need for better testing, the need to be able to launch tests at this at smaller scale, and then to be able to verify the results was something that really popped. The other thing, of course, is differentiation, that a lot of the technology has become commoditized, and it's important for vendors to really lead with the differentiation and to prove it. Again, short term, and being able to verify the claims, being able to have independent data on hand so that they can actually verify the claims in some of these tests. But also being able to align technology, and we're actually going to be talking about this. I think we're going to be segueing this into T-Mobile's presentation. The ways in which the technology aligns with the specific business goals of the company in a couple of ways. Evan is going to be talking about this in terms of how it relates to T-Mobile's emphasis on experience, but then also the ways in which a lot of the technologies are too universal and really not necessarily aligned with a specific business segment, and that there aren't enough test cases around a particular business segment to be convincing. I think those are really interesting ideas about the ways in which where the technology needs to head to satisfy the needs of marketers. And then finally I asked, what's the most overhyped trend in digital advertising? And again, we got quite a range, but it's interesting the things that are sort of registering in people's minds and what they're thinking about or what's being pitched to them. Voice, I think universally I keep hearing voice is still overhyped. It's still not proving itself as a consumer model. The habits aren't there yet to justify it. Blockchain, it's interesting that somebody's getting pitched ideas about TikTok all the time. This is the first that I've actually heard of TikTok. Anybody else, is anybody advertising on TikTok yet? You are? Where? What are you doing? Yeah. On TikTok, I'd love to hear about that. I hope we can hear about that over the next few days. Influencer marketing and audio, Facebook, and then talk of emerging channels. I wanted to highlight sort of this last quote because I thought it was really apropos of where programmatic has come over the last 10, 12 years. Is that, if you'll recall, originally programmatic was pitched to us as something that was going to simplify things. The automation was going to make things easier, and as we know, exactly the opposite has happened. But I think this is a really interesting point. What it has done is make us start asking smarter questions about who our advertising is reaching and what the real impact is. In other words, it's really raised the bar for accountability across the board. And that's an interesting byproduct of programmatic, and I think something that we'll be talking about and we'll be seeing across the board over the next few days. I wanted to, just a few, for those of you who are new to the summit, I do want to outline a few basic summit rules so you understand how this format works. First of all, everything that we do on stage at the MediaPost Summits is on the record. We're live streaming it, we're reporting on it, we're blogging it, we'll have after-action reports and video clips, we'll be posting the videos afterwards. If you have people back at the home office who you want to have tune in, go have them come to MediaPost.com and they can find the links here. But then everything, when we come off stage, everything is off the record. And that's where we have the roundtables. For those of you who are new to this experience, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the roundtables. They really are the heart of our summit. It's where we take the content here and turn it into genuine conversations. And believe me, when you take part in that experience, those conversations go on to the, when you try to kill yourself on the ATVs this afternoon, or you go horseback riding, or on the golf courses. It's really the formula that we've developed over the last 15 years that makes this work. My point is, at noon, don't go out and take the phone call. Stay here for the next 45 minutes or an hour and invest in the roundtables. They really will pay you back. How many of you are first-timers at Tahoe? Okay, 3 rules of Tahoe. Those of you who've been here before, you can ignore me because you've heard me do this before. First rule, drink. Drink and drink again. Second rule, don't screw around with rule number 1. That little vague headache that you're feeling, that's altitude and dehydration happening at once. They have a humidity here of like 7, 8, 9%. I'm a northern Jersey boy. I was raised in the shadow of the Meadowlands. When I first came here, I thought it was the end of days when I saw humidity at 8%. I didn't know that was legally allowable. But believe me, you want to keep hydrated. It's really important, especially if you're working out or hiking around here. Also, coolest damn place on the planet. This is where Frank and the Rat Pack had their casino, for God's sakes. This is where Michael Corleone had his headquarters. You find the right tour guide, they'll tell you where the bodies are buried. And yeah, Fredo is out in the middle of that lake somewhere. You don't get damn cooler than that. So welcome to Tahoe. I hope you have a good time. It's one of our